I'm Edie Lush, and I'm very delighted to be joined now in the Hub Culture Pavilion in Davos by Shirin Neshat. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me a little bit about what you are thinking. I know a lot about your work, a lot about the work with women. Tell me what you think, how far you've achieved, or how you've changed the perception of women, perhaps in Iran or abroad.
Well, I think it would be a bit of an overstatement for me to claim that I've made any big changes, but I think my work, it really represents just one point of view, one voice of a woman who's lived longer now outside of her country than inside. And so my perspective is obviously that of an exilic artist, that it's filled with nostalgia, but at the same time, I pay very detailed attention to the issues that are relevant today. I have make a lot of research, and so my work has this both, let's say, fictional, stylized fashion, at the same time really addressing reality, but again all from the perspective of an artist from distance. And so I would call it an accented nomadic art.
Okay. How does that come across, for example? Give me an example where you feel like an exile has come through in your art.
Well, I mean, just to give a little history, I was 17 when I found myself pretty much abandoned in the US, because originally my family had my plans for me to return. But the Islamic Revolution pretty much defined my life, my separation from the family, and I've been away. I think the last time I was in Iran was 1996. So I think the very foundation of my work is really for myself to create a framework, a kind of an expression that I could face my own personal dilemma as someone who's feeling abandoned and sort of has never been able to cope with that entirely. So there's a lot of personal, emotional, existential issues in my work outside of just purely political issues of a country. But I think that's what maybe makes it more accessible, because it's coming from that deeply personal perspective.
Which is always the best place for it to come from. Well, how do you feel about the president of Iran being here in Davos?
I'm extremely impressed. I listened to him and I understood this, of course, platform is him addressing the world. But I have to say that I felt rather emotional and rather hurt when at the end of his speech he invited the whole world to come to Iran. And here we are, Iranians who have not been able to visit Iran. I mean, he went to extent talking about the hospitality of Iranian people. And again, I felt bad because he didn't address the internal issues of the country, because the world is not really interested in the Iranian situation in the inside, but how it affects them. And I find that really problematic. The issue of human rights and the issue of innocent people, of Iranians who have never been able to return and be reunified with their families, such as myself. So on that personal level, I was really hurt. But I felt that he beautifully addressed the issues of the nuclear energy, the Syrian conflict, in terms of how the people of Syria should be choosing who should rule the country and not others. I just thought he was really impressive. But again, he avoided, or I guess nobody expected him to touch on any other subjects.
I know that you recently also protested outside the UN, I think after a couple of days after winning quite a big prize. Is that right?
Well, that's been a little bit exaggerated. It was actually back in 2009.
Okay.
And it was during the uprising of 2009 in the streets. And we protested and went on hunger strike 3 days in front of UN, very specifically about demanding the release of the prisoners, who some of them were our friends, they were protesters, they were intellectuals and artists.
And how do you feel that the U.S., what role has the U.S. government had in bringing Iran to the table and where Iran is today?
Well, I mean, I have to say, I listened to John Kerry yesterday. I'm really invested in even Syria and entire Middle East, since I'm working in Egypt now. And I found him so convincing. I mean, I find him such a respectable man, and also Obama. But it really bothered me a lot how they invited and disinvited Iran. It really sent the wrong message. As if by bringing Iran into that international dialogue is really encouraging them to the changing of that image of Iran as being the axis of evil, and really engaging in issues regarding their neighbors, who happen to be their biggest ally and happens to be the most critical country that could address the issue. And I just was really puzzled by the elimination of Iran, and I felt that it was a mistake, and I'm very disappointed by that.
Back to art, tell me about your next project in Egypt.
Well, I'm glad you asked about this. I have been for the past 3.5 years obsessively working on a film, no longer about Iran, but about Egypt. The legendary Egyptian singer Umm Kulthum, which in my mind is the most relevant subject. And not only that, she was such an iconic female presence in the arts, but also she was a nationalist. She fought for an idea of unity and peace all over the Middle East. She's loved by millions of people. And that, you know, when she died, 4 million people showed up in Tahrir Square. And I think both in relevance to the Middle Eastern community in returning to visit her, but also to the Western culture, to understand that we had a woman that transcended to such a level of popularity of an artist, and that is actually unprecedented in the West. So it really gives me a great pride, and I really do hope that we succeed to make this film.
Shirin, thank you so much for stopping by the Hub Culture Pavilion here in Davos, and I'm Edie Lash.